This video will show you how to replace the master cylinder on a Chrysler Town & Country. This will be located along the driver's side of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now before I start the removal process of the master cylinder, there's one thing that I like to note. You will have to bleed the brakes. We want to make sure each one of the bleeder screws on each wheel does open up. If one happens to break, you may have to service that or replace a caliper, and it's nice to know ahead of time. With that said, after that, we're at the master cylinder along the driver's side of the engine compartment. Now prior to removing the master cylinder cap, even though we are replacing the master cylinder and all the fluid in this area, I want to make sure nothing falls inside. I'm just going to use a clean rag and a quick wipe along this outer edge here. Continuing on, we can open up the master cylinder cap. After you've done that, it's always a good idea to remove as much fluid from inside of this as possible. You can use a fluid extractor. Once you have as much fluid out as possible, we're making our way along the driver's side of the master cylinder. Here's one option of a fluid extractor that you could use. Of course, we'll dispose of all fluid properly. As you start looking along the driver's side of the master cylinder here, we can see that we have our level sensor and we have two brake lines. Let's start with the level sensor electrical connector. As far as this connector, it does have a red locking tab. It's fairly dirty here, but I'm just using a small pick. I'm going to pull that down. Now we would want to squeeze on the next tab here and then pull this down and out of place. Once you have it disconnected, a quick inspection for corrosion. That looks good. We'll set it aside. Now we're continuing on to our two brake lines. Now for the forward brake line, I'm using a 12 millimeter. We're going to start turning this fitting counterclockwise. Keep in mind there could still be fluid in this area. We have our collection receptacle under here. One other thing that I would note is brake fluid is typically corrosive. It will eat the paint off of your vehicle. If you feel as though you have any brake fluid on anything, rinse it down with some clean water in the end. Same process for the next line along the rearward side there. We're at the point where we're going to prepare to remove the hardware holding the master cylinder in place to the brake booster. One thing I would note is you want to be extremely careful. The positive terminal of your battery is close to the master cylinder. If you're trying to get in there with a swivel socket and an extension, you want to be extremely careful not to touch up against this. Even if you're trying to be over here, you might find that it makes its way over, in which case it might arc on you. Let's go ahead and protect that area just in case. I'm going to use a rag. You can use pretty much anything from preventing it from touching and creating sparks. Now we can start removing our two 13 millimeter mounting nuts. I'm on the driver's side upper portion of the master cylinder where it connects to the brake booster. Then I'll make my way over to the other side. Take hold of the master cylinder, you can give it a wiggle, start sliding it away from the brake booster. We can remove that from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Prior to installing any brand new part, let's make sure we clean and inspect the mounting area. This is extremely important to pay attention to. This is our brake booster. If you did have a master cylinder leak and brake fluid was coming through the inboard seal, making its way inside of this, you're going to find that you have a braking issue. You'd want to replace this brake booster. I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up. I don't see any fluid inside. Just use a clean rag, no detergents. Now let's pay attention to each of our two brake lines. Go ahead and clean up each one of those two fittings. We do want to make sure the brake lines and fittings are in good, usable order. These look good. Let's prepare to install the brand new master cylinder. The first thing you want to do for the master cylinder typically would be to bench bleed the master cylinder. Now this can either be done in the vehicle or it can be done on a bench, and typically you'd want to hold it with a vise. Now since not everybody has a vise, but they will have the vehicle in front of them, let's do it this way. With that said, I'm going to take the master cylinder and I'll get it in place up against my brake booster. With that in the proper placement, we'll continue on to our two mounting nuts. Start them on, snug them up, torque each of them to 18 foot-pounds. They're both started on. Let's snug them up. They're both snug. Let's go ahead and torque them to that 18 foot-pounds. Double check, make sure the master cylinder is properly secured in place. Now the next thing we need to do is prepare our master cylinder bleed kit. Now these can come in all different shapes and sizes, but typically you're going to need two adapters that can screw into the master cylinder where the lines would be, and two hoses of some sort. As far as those adapters, they're going to screw in along the driver's side, like I said, where the lines would be. The hoses are going to go from each one of our adapters up inside the master cylinder, and they would need to be underneath the fluid level. Now with that said, let's continue on with those two adapters. We're going to make sure that they're snug, and then we'll bring the hoses up into the master cylinder. Now each one of the ports on the master cylinder does have the same bore size, so we really don't have to worry about mixing these up. Now I'm going to remove my master cylinder cap. Turn that counterclockwise, we'll remove that. So now it's time for our hoses. With the hoses in place, we'll continue on with the manufacturer specified brake fluid. You can either use .3 or .4 brake fluid. Now, just as I mentioned, we need to make sure we top off the master cylinder with the brake fluid. We also want to make sure that the tips of each one of our hoses are underneath the fluid. Once we've done that, I'm going to make my way inside the passenger compartment. I'm going to slowly pump the brake pedal. We don't need to go fast here. What we're doing is we're forcing any air out from inside the master cylinder out through each one of these lines. The fluid will be pushing it through. We need to continue this process until we see only fluid and no air bubbles. Top off the master cylinder as necessary. Now at this point, we finished bleeding that master cylinder. There's no more air making its way up through the lines. We're going to start removing our master cylinder bleed kit. When we remove this, I like to have one of my empty containers here. I'm going to take the end of the hose and bring it down in here as I start removing the far end there. I want to do this so any fluid that's still inside of the hoses is going to get recycled properly. Now let's make this the lowest point. Reinstall the cover on top of the master cylinder. This will help slow down the fluid flow. Now we can start removing each of those lines. We're going to do it one at a time. As we remove them, you're typically going to find that fluid will come out of the area. So let's try to get our line installed. We're doing this one at a time, as I mentioned. Just going to bring this up. We're diverting that fluid down inside our container, as I mentioned. We'll remove the adapter. Start on that line. Now that I have it started in, I'm going to lightly snug it. Right there, it's bottomed out just a tiny bit further. Let's go ahead and repeat the process for the next line. That's lightly bottomed out as well. Let's go ahead and top off that master cylinder again real quick. As you can see, I am up to my maximum line. That's exactly where I want to be. At this point, I'm going to reinstall my cover. Now that I have the cap in place, it's time to bleed the master cylinder and upper portion of the brake lines. We like to do this so we can remove as much air as possible from this area prior to forcing it down through the entire braking system. So for this, I have a second person inside of the vehicle. What I need to do is open each one of my 2 brake lines. I'm going to ask the person inside of the vehicle to slowly press down on that brake pedal. While they're doing so, it's going to be forcing fluid out through the brake master cylinder in towards those lines, and typically it's going to force out any air in between the 2 areas. Once I feel as though all the fluid has made its way out, I'm going to close them. They're going to release the brake pedal, and we'll repeat this process as many times as we deem fit. We're attempting to remove as much air from the system as possible. At this point, I'm just going to open up the lines, and then I'll ask them to go ahead and pump that pedal. Go ahead and press down, please. Now that it's all the way down, I'm just going to close those real quick before he releases. They're both closed. Go ahead and release, please. Now that that pedal's fully released, I'm going to open these again, just as I did before, and ask them to press down. Go ahead and slowly press down, please. You can release. Now, as I mentioned, you want to do this as many times as you deem fit. The main intent is to remove as much air from the system as possible. Once you feel as though you've done so, go ahead and clean any mess in this area, and we're going to top off the master cylinder one more time. Make sure you clean that area well enough that you can double check for leaks. Reconnect your electrical connector. We're going to press that in. Listen for a click, lock it down with the red locking tab, a quick wiggle. We can go ahead and remove our cover from the positive terminal, anything that we have under this area, and we're going to continue on with the rest of our manual brake bleed at each wheel. Now, prior to removing the master cylinder cap, I want to make sure nothing falls inside. I'm just going to use a clean rag and a quick wipe along this outer edge here. Let's get started on the brake bleed. We're at the master cylinder. We always like to remove as much fluid from inside the master cylinder reservoir as possible and replace it with brand new fluid first. Go ahead and use a fluid extractor. Locate the cap, remove it, a quick inspection of the seal, confirming it's not swollen or damaged in any way. This does look good. Let's go ahead and remove as much fluid from this as possible and replace it with .3 or .4 brake fluid. There we are. Just wipe down any drips. Reinstall that cover. Now when we start our brake bleed, we're going to bleed the brakes in a specific sequence. We're starting on the driver's side rear. We're going to make our way to the passenger side front. After we've bled both of those brakes, we have to stop at the master cylinder. We're going to top it off. Continuing on, we're going to make our way to the right rear and then the left front. The process will be the same for each of these. So of course I have my collection receptacle here. I'm going to remove my bleeder screw cover. I'll use my collection receptacle, a 10mm wrench on the bleeder screw. Now before I open this, I'm going to ask the person inside of the vehicle to pump the brakes approximately 3 times, and they're going to hold it. They're going to let me know they're holding it, and I'm going to open up the bleeder screw. We're paying attention in this area. We want to make sure we see only clean brake fluid making its way out with no air bubbles. Repeat this process as many times as you deem fit. Go ahead and pump the brake pedal, please. Okay, you can release, thank you. At this point, I feel as though I've completed the brake bleeding process on my driver's side rear. I have only clean fluid making its way out and no air. Obviously, on your vehicle, repeat the process as many times as necessary. Now, just as I mentioned, the next wheel that we're going to move to after we've finished cleaning and installing our boot here is to our passenger side front. We're going to repeat this process there. All right, on to the passenger side front. Passenger side front now. I don't have a bleeder screw cover here. You would want to remove it. We have our collection receptacle. Go ahead and pump up that brake pedal, please. Go ahead and pump. Go ahead and pump. This is looking good. Let's try it one more time here. Go ahead and pump, please. Okay. You can release, thank you. Remove my collection receptacle. We'll clean up any mess. As you saw, I had only clean fluid making its way out, no air. Once you clean, obviously, if you have a bleeder screw cover, reinstall that now. Now at this point, you're going to want to make your way to that master cylinder. We want to make sure we top it off so it doesn't go low and of course draw in any air, in which case we'd have to re-bleed the brakes. Once you've topped off that master cylinder, you're going to the passenger side rear. Go ahead and bleed that caliper the same way as I showed you on the driver's side rear. After that, you're making your way to the driver's side front. You're going to bleed the front caliper the same way I just showed you at the passenger side front. After that, just make sure you top off that master cylinder one last time. Okay, friend, we finished with our vehicle brake bleed. At this point, of course, we want to make sure we clean any mess. We're going to double check for leaks. The torque for each one of your wheel lug nuts will be 100 foot-pounds. After you've done that, go ahead and pump up your brake pedal, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.